What was that? Quite simply, what was that? So today, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be reviewing quite possibly the most disappointing episode of Doctor Who of the entire season so far. And we will be going in depth with spoilers, as these videos usually are. So you can watch episode 8 of series 11, The Witchfinders, on a BBC iPlayer, as well as many other formats, such as Amazon Prime, which this episode was leaked onto earlier this week before it was aired. So you can watch it on Amazon Prime, but you have to pay for it, which makes absolutely no sense. But because why would you pay for it when it's on BBC iPlayer? I don't know, is it cheaper to have an Amazon Prime membership and not a TV license? I don't know, I haven't really worked it out. So if the only TV show you watch is Doctor Who, I would just buy it on DVD. But it's not the only TV show I watch, so yay! But we will be going into depth, so this will be a spoiler review. I do not know what streaming service is available in the US, but here we go! I'm really happy about this one. So first of all, before I go into this episode, I'm not going to lie, I went into this episode with quite possibly the highest expectations of this series so far. Not only have we had one outstanding historical, one good historical, a very good historical, we'd also had Kablam, which proved to be a brilliant, well not brilliant, but it had its flaw, it was a good, solid episode. And then this week we were promised something that looked visually and aesthetically pleasing and spooky and everything, and it does deliver on that. It is still visually and aesthetically spooky and tense and atmospheric, and it looked so amazing, and the VF just looks so, you know, I love witches. I've been learning about it in history, I'm learning about that time period, so what else can I say about, I mean, I've been learning about James I this very day. And I cannot tell you how much this episode gets his role as a king so completely and utterly wrong, which I'll get to later. But I was just so disappointed by this episode, but I was incredibly excited for it because I love witch hunters and witchfinders and witch trials. It's such a compelling part of history, much like Black History and the partition of India when you go deep into it, which I did after watching Demons of the Punjab. But this episode makes me want to pull my eyes out and throw them at the witches, because this is just not good to watch. It is quite possibly the most disappointing episode of Doctor Who ever. I'm not gonna lie, I went into this episode with sky high expectations though. I mean, it's better than many episodes, just incredibly disappointing. But yeah, oh, so disappointed. Because I like the episode that came out in 2007 about witches and Shakespeare, set in this time period, is one of the best, in my opinion, of season 3. It is the Shakespeare Code, and I recommend you go watch it. I heard people complaining about, there was a YouTuber called Ace Creeper who said it was a bad episode. What about it is bad? I mean, sure, that's your opinion, but you didn't name anything that was actually bad about it, and it made me so cross that you said, I mean, sure, it's your opinion, you think it's bad, fair enough, but give me some reasons why it's bad in comparison. The witches, even the witches scared me more than the witches in this episode. I mean, sure, the mud witches looked great, and but it's just a bit of makeup over the top of someone. I mean, you look at the prosthetics for the witches in the Shakespeare Code, and then you look at the prosthetics for the Morax at the end of the episode. I thought that was absolutely horrific. It was like someone had thrown up across its face. It didn't, well, I know that might be necessarily the idea, but there was nothing there. It was just that you had the wonderful Carrionite witches, and they looked scary. They didn't just look odd and badly created and like something had just thrown up across its face. It had articulation, it had character. But the Morax at the end of the episode, it just didn't have character. It was, oh, I'm a party, I'm gonna resurrect my alien army and destroy the world. And it just feels so badly written. It is hard, I genuinely mean it, hard to watch it if you go in with it with high expectations. I genuinely think this is the Suicide Squad of the Doctor Who universe. I went into this with the same kind of expectations I would have gone into Suicide Squad if I'd just watched the trailers. I mean, I watched the bad reviews, so before watching it, I watched it and thought it was alright. But if you'd gone into it with the sky-high expectations that I would have, not seeing any of the critical reviews, you would feel the same way you do coming out of this episode of Doctor Who. What I feel is one of the very few positives of this episode is Jodie Whittaker's Doctor. She was very good in this episode. The way she deals with the whole witch trials bit and being treated as if a witch, and like that line about women are always being patronised or drowned or whatever, that was a good line. It's one of the reasons why I think it would have been a good idea to have a female doctor, and in this instance it works, and I can see why you'd want to tell this story with her rather than, say, David Tennant's Doctor or Matt Smith's Doctor, or even Peter Capaldi's Doctor as well, which would have been interesting. But she excels here, and it is one of her better episodes of the season so far. The companions also, I think the other writers have been better at spacing out the companions more than Chris Chibnall, because once again the companions feel more evenly spaced. I think the only guest writer who hasn't been able to evenly space out the characters has been Vinay Patel in The Demons of the Punjab, where Ryan and Graham sort of feel sidelined, but it's still more evenly spaced than episodes written by Chris Chibnall. I think very much so Chris Chibnall needs to work on his characters and plot very seriously, because he was good at he was very good at Jodie's Doctor in episode 1 and episode 2, and then he started to lose it with Arachnids in the UK and the Saranga conundrum. Where she came off as a bit annoying. Here she excels though, which is good. And the companions also excel. They're all evenly placed out. I mean, the relationship with Yasmin and the Willow girl was nice, and the fact that Graham had to come up as Witchfinder General, which actually at that time was a band called Matthew Hopkins. They weren't just handed out like candy, I'm afraid. Matthew Hopkins was a self-proclaimed Witchfinder General though. They didn't give it out. It was an award that someone self-proclaimed to themselves. Not reference to Matthew Hopkins, which really disappointed me as well, because I knew quite a bit about this history because it was all fresh in my mind. So, well, why is Matthew Hopkins in this? I mean, it would have made so much more sense. I mean, if they had Matthew Hopkins in this instead of James I, who I don't think necessarily was a good idea to have in this episode, I think maybe it would have made more sense. Because, I mean, the James I did not just wander around the country, I'm afraid, looking into other people's witch trials or whatever. He had a country to run, and he didn't just snoop around by himself. He would have had guards and so on. He doesn't just do that. He doesn't. There are people who want to kill him. The bloody code is not thought of a good thing, and the witch hunts were part of the bloody code. People thought these laws were harsh. James I isn't exactly the most liked king, neither is he the most disliked king, but, you know, that's another thing. A negative of this episode is how badly portrayed James I is. And it's so tragic, because I had the feeling that Alan Cumming could have been, I mean, I heard he was a good actor and so on, and he did look like he could play a role very well when I've seen some of his other stuff. But he's just tragically, and I mean it, tragically miscast. I'm sure he could have played James I if he'd been portrayed accurately in the script. Which is another thing, James I is just so badly executed here. Not only did he speak so goddamn annoyingly, by the end of the episode it was on my nerves, particularly as they were in more serious scenes, and it was still speaking in that weird cartoony voice. I actually thought for a while, the first few minutes while he was on screen, that he had a voiceover. That's how bad it was. It looked like he wasn't speaking like that, which was really bad. It was. Also, another thing is his feelings towards Ryan. Not only have I been told that James I is married to a wife, and yes, it's not unusual for the people to sleep with other people and talk to other people and have flirtations with other people. It's just the way he latches on to Ryan, where at this point, no matter what the BBC may think, about diversity, inclusion. Black people were treated as slaves back then. And I know that's a bad thing, but James I would have thought he was a disgusting mongrel. I mean, he's not, obviously, but he would have thought that. It's just so... I mean, obviously it's a bad view to take, and I agree it's a bad view to take, but you can't try and say, oh, we are trying to educate the British people, which the BBC is supposed to do. That's what they get paid by the taxes to do, when this is very clearly not educational. I mean, a lot of episodes of Doctor Who aren't, but this one just serves out false facts, which is not, and I know Doctor Who does that a lot too, but particularly in this case, I mean, you did a brilliant episode on Black history and so on, and then it feels like you just turn it on your head in this episode and say, oh, well, everything was honky-dory back in the 1700s when these people were being used as slaves, but everyone still liked them, apparently. That is not the case. Not only was he married and probably wouldn't have gone for a man, but it was a black man. I know, it's just... I know I'm coming across as really bad here, really racist and so on, but I'm sorry, but that's the way it was then. I mean, like, even if he'd gone for someone like the Doctor, it would have made more sense. It would have been funny, probably, if he'd gone for the Doctor. I think it's just... I know there were rumours about him being gay. It's not just that, it's just the fact, I'm sorry. There were plantations, and they were being sold as slaves and treated like possessions, and it's a horrible thing, and it's just not thought about here. It's just thought, oh, King James would have loved that person, but sure, I'm sure Ryan is a lovely character and all that, but you know, it's a bad issue. And it's not just that, the rest of the guest cast, the person who plays Becca Savage, she was the best part of this episode. She was a good actress, and then up until she turned into that thing, I'm going to say, that thing, she was one of the best part of this episode. She did feel quite intimidating and powerful, and which is another thing, I'm pretty sure the 1700s was a sexist society as well. This is the thing Doctor Who is very guilty of, portraying diversity. I mean, it's not, I know these times were not good times, but they sit and say, this time is not good for women, and that woman's a landowner, she owns a land, she owns a town, and that would have been incredibly bad, especially considering she's a widow. I mean, she would basically have been powerless in that situation, realistically. Someone would have overthrown her by that point, because like at that time people thought women were weak. I know it sounds really, really sexist and so on, but it is just the way it was. And no matter how much the BBC wants to hide that, and how we want to hide that, and I agree, maybe we should look more to the future than towards the past and making things right, but don't blatantly lie to people. It's a blatant lie. I'm sorry, but it is. It was very well directed, and I did get the sense that it would be from the trailer, which is one of the things that got me so hyped for this episode. It did look like it would be brilliantly directed, and it is delivered very well. I think the BBC has had quite a few good directors this year, and the VFX, I think for the first time, the VFX have not been that good. The giant mud tendril just became across the city. I mean, that face at the end was just... I almost laughed at that because it was so ridiculous, and I was just like, I'm sorry, but it just looked, you know, it was so bad. The Mud Witches themselves did look good though. I will give them that. They didn't feel as threatening. They just felt like, I know that's how zombies probably would be in life, and how witches, particularly the witches in particular, they're usually more cunning and fearsome, but, you know, I mean, I haven't been the greatest fan of Series 11 up until this point, and I haven't been the greatest fan of Doctor Who. I sat and confessed to someone today that I think shows like Grey's Anatomy and what was the other one? There are other shows in the world at the moment I do feel that I prefer than Doctor Who at the moment, which is a big thing for me to say, considering I've basically grown up on this show. I did say that overall I would probably pick Doctor Who, but in terms of quality today, shows like Grey's Anatomy have more edge, and shows like, I'm trying to think of the other one even The Big Bang Theory, I think, has more edge than Doctor Who does. And other sci-fi shows like The X-Files, I felt, have more edge than Doctor Who at the moment. That's probably just down to the fact that Doctor Who has had far too many stories. And at this point, it is at this point that I would regrettably say, as Whovian, that this show should be coming towards an end, and maybe should have done about 5 years ago. The last 5 years we've had 2 good doctors. I think we've had one brilliant doctor, who's been Peter Capaldi, and we've had a good doctor in Jodie Whittaker. I think it would be time to start thinking about drawing this to close. Maybe not because you have bad actors that play the doctor and so on, and the companions, well, there are quite a few duds in the companions. I mean, I'm afraid of Amanda McGill, you aren't the greatest actress in the world, and neither are you, Tosin Cole. I mean, we've got a great companion in Bradley Walsh, though. It's such a shame that it looks like Ryan Sinclair and Graham O'Brien may not be making it to season 12. But, I mean, just at this point, we've had 11 seasons of Doctor Who, and I think something close to 26 seasons of of Classic Who. That amounts to a total of 37 seasons of Doctor Who. It is the longest running Doctor Who science fiction show in the world. And, I mean, it does pain me to say this because it is such a big part of my life. I mean, if you just look around my room, there's Doctor Who everywhere you look. This isn't the only confined corner of Doctor Who in my room, trust me, it's not. It does pain me to say that maybe it is time for Doctor Who to come to a close. I think Jodie Whittaker, particularly with the recent rating success, I know it's not perfect, I know it's not holding getting a great hold, but it is doing well overall. I mean, the ratings are above 7 million in 7-day totals, consistently every week, I believe. Every 7 days it has been above 7 million. I think there might just be one that went below 7 million, and even that's not bad. I mean, it is at this point where they need to think about ending it, because, I mean, it would have been kind of sad to end with Peter Capaldi because you didn't have that sense of oomph, although I do feel season 10 and Twice Upon a Time would have been a great way to end Doctor Who. I think Doctor Who for me has already ended with season 10. I did enjoy season 10 and I enjoyed those final 3 episodes, and this season in particular has felt like it's become silly. And I mean, I haven't felt the same way about Doctor Who being this bad since, I think, rewatching season 6 and 7, which I think is the all-time low point for new revived Who. But, you know, I think this probably would come below series 6 and 7. I don't know, it's just not been very good for me. I mean, sorry about the noise, there are other people in this house that don't live alone. I am only 14, but it just feels like this year in particular we've had very weak story. I mean, I have only enjoyed 3 out of the 8 episodes of this series so far. I mean, they've been entertaining, but I haven't felt the urge to constantly rewatch them, particularly since Arachnids in the UK. I mean, the only episode I've rewatched since Arachnids in the UK is Kablam, which I think was a particularly good one. Since then, it just feels like the stories are becoming weaker and weaker, and more like the BBC is paying less attention to them. I mean, particularly this year, it was supposed to be an event season. The BBC described it as the crown jewel at one point, I believe. And it is very much the crown jewel of the BBC's crown. It is one of the most commercially viable British shows ever. And it's just going amongst so many dramas, like Grey's Anatomy, which has been going on for 15 seasons now. It still maintains that edge above all other content. I know they're having a ratings dip at the moment, but it still maintains that sharp edge on storytelling. And The X-Files too, although I haven't enjoyed season 11 as much as other seasons, it still remains to have that sharp edge above other sci-fi dramas. I mean, I would compare this to episodes like Familiar, which is an X-Files episode about witches and witchcraft, and that felt more intense, more entertaining than this episode probably ever could. I just feel, and the guest cast was just so weak this week as well. I mean, Alan Cumming was miscast, Becca Savage was the only good one, and that Willow girl was just so bad, it was hard to watch. It's just, I mean, it is regretful for me to say that I think Doctor Who should end, but I do think this season has been such a clunker for me, and it's a success and a failure, I feel. In many ways, a lot of people are saying, oh, it's a bad show, it's terrible, and a lot of people are saying it's good, and I've only felt like, I haven't felt really towards either side of the groups, really, on Doctor Who fans until this week, where I have felt like it's just so overwhelmingly disappointing. I have felt that. I know this episode hasn't been that much about Witchfinders, and I know this video is taking a bit of a strong turn, but it's just, this episode pretty much epitomises every problem I've had with the series so far. It has, for me, been one of the biggest disappointments of the year. Sadly, it has been, because there was so much hype around it. So, oh, it's a female doctor, it's a brand new showrunner. You know, I wasn't necessarily, I do remember when Doctor Who was rebooted in season 5, and it felt so fresh, and it felt so new and so magical. It burst that flame, that wonder that Doctor Who had encapsulated for the previous 5 years, and it just felt like it gave me a new interest. In this episode, it's given me something to hate, which I hate about Doctor Who, that it gives me something to hate. In this episode, and recently, particularly in episodes like the Surang Conundrum, I know Jodie was good in this episode, and one of the comments that I first made about Jodie Whittaker is that I hope she's been cast for her talents and not because she's a woman. And there have been episodes this season where I have felt that she was not cast because she was the woman with the best merits over all the other actors and actresses. And I do hope they looked at actors and actresses of different races and colour, because that would kind of defeat the whole diversity and inclusion strategy from the BBC. And I do not feel that, I find it incredibly hard to believe that she was the best actress for this role, because she has been good in some episodes, just not fabulous. I think she's been good, she's been solid. I think I can believe Peter Capaldi was the best choice in 2014, because I think he was one of the best actors for the role. I can believe David Tennant was the best actor for the role. I can believe Christopher Eccleston was the best actor for the role. I can believe Tom Baker, so many other actors I can believe, but this is the Doctor that I feel personally was chosen more for what she represents rather than what she wanted. I mean, I'm not totally against the idea of a female Doctor. I don't know if I have to constantly repeat this, but I'm not against it. I can see how it would work, but in moments, I mean, this episode less so than normal, but I have felt, particularly in episodes like Arachnids in the UK, the Suranga Conundrum, and really in Demons of the Punjab and in Kablam, really, while she's good in it, she's solid, but she's not the best actress that could have played this. There are so many actresses I can name. Heck, even some that work with Chris Chibnall, Olivia Colman. I've seen that name so many times in association with who they should have cast for Doctor Who, and I agree with them. Olivia Colman would have worked better in this role. She's had a previous cameo in Doctor Who in 2010. I mean, it'd been in the same situation as Peter Capaldi. And I just, so sad that it hasn't materialised like that. It just makes me so, I mean, she just doesn't feel like, I mean, surely Olivia Colman was approached for this role. I would be surprised if she wasn't, considering her close relationship with Chris Chibnall and the way she worked with him on Broadchurch, because obviously that Jodie Whittaker was made by Chris Chibnall, but so was Olivia Colman on Broadchurch. That video took a bit of a dark turn and less about the Witchfinders and more about the series on a whole so far. But yeah, we've got 2 episodes left. Let's hope, fingers crossed, they're not as disappointing as this week's was. Next week looks, I'm going to say interesting because I don't want to say good, because I feel like I'll be let down again. My expectations have been successfully lowered this week. I just want to point that out. If you did not guess already, my expectations have been lowered by this episode. And hopefully going into next week, which does look interesting. I hope it does work out. I hope it does get better. We have one more episode written by Chris Chibnall, and then we have the dreaded New Year's special, which does not look very good. They posted the first picture and she's wearing a rainbow scarf. It's like very Tom Baker idea and concept, having a scarf. I just wish it wasn't. I don't know. It feels I feel like they're hinting at something, but it just never materialises. There's a common thing with this series. They keep on hinting at things that never materialise, like hinting that it's going to be good and it's really not. I was sorry, I've just been really disappointed by this episode. I mean, sure, if you like this, fair enough. I'm not going to hold that against you. I know there are people who did like this episode. I know there was a lot of people who liked this. I was really surprised that I didn't like this episode. I did feel it was poorly written. I'm sorry, it was poorly written. There was bad dialogue. It's just, I'm gonna have to, overall it's just underwhelming, I think. But yeah, so I give this episode a total score out of 10 of 3 out of 10. I'm gonna put it on the same level as the Suranga Conundrum and go ahead and call it the most disappointing episode of Doctor Who, of at least New Who, because I've never really had any high expectations for anything in Classic Who, because hell, it's Classic Who. I mean, there are good episodes, but don't raise your expectations too far, because they really did have a low budget then. But yes, thank you for watching. Please join me next week when we will be discussing episode 9, It Takes You Away. Hopefully we can get it out on time. Probably shouldn't say that, because then these episodes will not be out on time. But yeah, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe down below, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Bye!